So it was about 2 summers ago that I built my dogs a little wading pool from rocks around the property. They absolutely love hopping in to get their bellies wet during the heat of summer. But when they go stay with my folks, they don't have a watering hole. So this week I am fixing that. I made 2 versions. One that is made from a standard toddler kiddie pool. And actually, if you don't have dogs, then you could use this for a toddler's pool. Then version 2 is one I plan to keep on the wraparound porch at my house. All right, let's go ahead and jump into how to make them. Since this will be in contact with the ground and also around water, I'm building it from treated material. I started by flipping out the wings on my miter saw stand and cutting down 2 boards that will make up the framing around the pool. To create a ramp, I measured in from the edge of the board, then used a straight edge to make a diagonal line. Here you can use a bandsaw, a jigsaw, or even a circular saw, but I used my track saw to make sure that both of these came out nice and straight. It was at this point that my mom stopped in to say hi, and as I do, I put her to work. I cut 3 boards to be cross members in the framing and joined these 2 rails together. Since this will be outdoors and around moisture, I'm using Titebond 3 since it is a waterproof glue. I applied glue and then screws to attach the cross members to the rails, making sure to use the pool as a placing reference. When attaching these, I used a square to make sure I was attaching them at a 90. I set my mom on the miter saw to start cutting down the treated 1x boards that will make up the deck. As she was knocking that out, I went back to the body and added in a few more framing pieces. These pieces will make more sense later on, but their purpose is to give support to the deck boards that will be cut to allow for the pool to slip in. Then, since I wanted to add in a roof to provide some shade, I also added those boards in. I used wood glue here and a clamp to squeeze it to the body. And just a tip, if you use a squeeze quick clamp like this Bessie one, you can get it roughed in position and under slight pressure, then knock it into perfectly plumb before tightening it down all the way. All right, now on to adding the deck. Mom was done cutting the boards by this point, and to start, I went to the very far end of the ramp and attached that board first. This way I could line up both sides flush with the rails and make sure that it stayed square. Mom was still wanting to help, so she tackled one side while I did the other. And it was her first time using a drill, so that was pretty entertaining.
It goes so fast.
Yeah. How about we put it into one for you? Like you can ease into it. You don't have to just much full throttle. You can see we are using and moving a spacer along to butt up each board against. You can make this as small or as large as you like, but don't make it too big to start because these boards will shrink up as they dry out completely. And it is important that you make sure the boards are butting up against these spacers. Hey, you need to make sure you're up against your spacer. You're gonna be throwing me out of square. Oh. Have you been doing that the whole time?
No.
Are you sure?
No.
When I came up to the uprights that will be making up the roof, I used a jigsaw to quickly cut out a notch so that the boards could fit in around it. I also made sure to throw screws in these boards into those additional framing members I added in earlier. Again, you'll see why these are here later on. All right, I'm sure some of you just thought I forgot a pole was going in the center, but I didn't. I actually thought it would be easier to lay the boards out as is, then cut the circle out rather than trying and cut the boards prior. To do this, I first placed the pole, then I used a Sharpie to roughly trace around the pole bottom. After making my mark, I went around with my jigsaw to quickly cut it out. I test fitted the pool, I saw where it needed to remove a little bit more material, and then cut a little more until the pool fit nicely. I had actually run out of deck board, so my mom went and grabbed some more while I was cutting the hole. Once she was back, we finished the decking portion and then moved on.
I did an excellent job on cleaning these boards.
You did, they're coming out much more flush. So the next step is reinforcing the deck pieces that are way out away from the edge. To do this, I wanted to gain access to the underside. And to do that, I very carefully and slowly moved the unit to the ground. With this view, you can see how that additional framing member helps supports these boards some. But another board to angle across really does go a long way. I used a quick clamp to set it in position and screwed it down to each board it came across. I repeated in each one of the 4 corners, and this really helped stiffen things up. Next, I found center on the ramp and attached a support member in the center of the frame. After I attached it to the body, I moved around to the top side and screwed each slat down onto it as well. Alrighty, and now moving on to the roof. I cut up yet another board at the miter saw, then laid out a roof shape. And this can really be anything you personally like. After making some marks, I used a straight edge to make straight lines, then ran it over to the bandsaw to cut out. I used the first one as a template to make the second, cut that one out, and then moved on to attaching them to the uprights on the body. To make this job easier, I first measured down, then clamped a block in place so that I would have a kind of ledge to set this roof rail onto. I applied more Type Bond 3 here, then screwed the roof railings into place. Now to attach the roof. You can cut these boards quickly by setting a stop block up at the miter saw, or asking your mom like I did. I once again started with the outside most slat, making sure that it was flush on both ends when screwing it down. Then I just worked my way up to the peak. Once there, I started on the other edge and again worked towards the peak. Since my goal is shade here, I went with a much smaller gap and spacer between these boards. And I think that's it for construction. It's pretty dang simple, isn't it? Now, even though this is made from treated material and doesn't need it for protection, I went ahead and added a coat of stain to it just to pretty it up some. My mom offered to handle this task, so I set her up with a foam brush and General Finishes 450 stain in the color of cedar. I wasn't sure how it would act going on treated material, but it not only went on just fine, but completely transformed it and made it very pretty looking. While Mom handled that, I moved to working on a drain for the pool. The water will need to be emptied regularly, however, picking up a full pool would be, completely out of the question. I went on a hunt for a fitting with a rubber gasket and lock ring, but really wasn't having much luck until a friend told me to look at a water heater pan, as he remembers a fitting coming with it. And sure enough, that was a solid recommendation. Next, I drilled a hole in the pool so that the fitting could slip in, making sure the rubber gasket was on the inside, and then tightened down on the lock ring. This all looked fine as is, but I went ahead and added a layer of Type Bond Ultimate MP sealant to the outside just as backup. I placed the pool in its position and just roughly drilled a hole in the area close to the drain. I made this hole slightly larger than the PVC that will run through it so that I could easily feed it in. A few more fittings, including a ball valve, and I now have a way to drain the pool with ease. Now, you could bury this line or route it as far away from the deck as you want, but I made sure to place my unit where, when I drain the pool, the water will be running downhill and away. Real quick, I want to thank this video's sponsor, Audible, which is a great service for getting an unmatched selection of audiobooks, news, comedy, and more. They even have audio fitness and health workouts created exclusively for Audible. You can not only get your first audiobook for free, but also 2 Audible originals whenever you sign up for Audible for 30 days. Just visit audible.com/April Wilkerson, or you can text April Wilkerson to 500-500. If you're not already familiar with Audible Originals, these are exclusive audio titles from great storytellers across journalism, theater, literature, and a bunch of other categories. Now, I love consuming information, and audiobooks work great for me as I can download them into my phone, listen and learn while I'm building and on the go. I recently built a raised garden bed, so lately I've been listening to Raised Bed Gardening by Jason Johns. If you're like me and interested in decompressing in your garden and growing your own fresh vegetables, then I recommend giving it a listen. It's a complete step-by-step walkthrough guide on how to get started with raised bed gardening. And you can get it for free. So go to audible.com/April Wilkerson or text April Wilkerson to 500-500. Big thank you to Audible for helping me be more educated, entertained, and of course for supporting what I do. Then real quick, since I was making dog pools, I went ahead and made a smaller version. The steps are pretty much the same, so I'm just gonna go ahead and glaze over this one.
Like a tub. Instead of like a glove. Like a tub.
You'll notice the pan is much smaller, and so if you have smaller dogs, just know that you can use the same concept for any container that matches their size. Now, with this one having a rectangular shape to it, and therefore cut out, it was much easier to pre-cut boards for. I went ahead and measured and then cut boards as I was placing on the deck, you know, instead of waiting until after like I did with the kiddie pool. I also put in a drain on the side and then gave the entire thing a coat of stain to pretty it up some, or a lot actually. Now when you place the pool, if the bottom of the pool doesn't actually touch the ground where you set it, then you can add some gravel to the area first to build it up, but also keep it malleable. If you would like to build your own, I do have a set of plans covering both of these units. Come with a material list, a cut list, and all of the dimensions I used. All right, and that's gonna wrap up this project. I hope that you enjoyed it, and of course I would love to hear what you think about it down in the comments below. Real quick, for the next 2 weeks only, I have a new shirt design being offered. Makers gotta make. I find that the majority of people who get into making is a pretty resourceful bunch, where when we run into a problem, instead of just throwing in the towel, we find a workaround. Whether that be not having the right tool for the job, working harder because it takes more time than expected, or cramming in a truck's worth of lumber in a small car, like I did whenever I only had a Mini Cooper. Basically, this is a shirt for people who will do what it takes to get the job done. If you're interested in picking up yours, I only have them available for the next 2 weeks. There's a link for you down below. And of course, if you purchase one, big thank you for supporting what I do. All right, that's it for this one. I'll see you on my next project.